Jeff Paterson is the host of RinkWide Vancouver. Busy week. Was at it last night. And, of course, our Vancouver Canucks reporter. He joins us now. Good day.
No, might be a good day. It wasn't a good night. The least you guys could do, is leave a few of those bottles behind for us poor RinkWide guys.
Jeff,
RinkWide is tough these days. Trust me. Yeah. We need some help grinding through.
We're getting some in here next week, Jeff. There'll be one in the cabinet behind you. If you're finding yourself
one under the desk
through another, absolutely.
There have been
we got some mugs here. No one will know the difference.
There have been worse seasons for the Vancouver Canucks, God knows, in the last decade, Jeff. But I honestly feel like I have to apologize to you for your job description because I don't know that there's been less entertaining seasons. Very few. Like maybe the Jason Magna years.
How we forget Willie and Magna with the Twins. Come on, Blake.
I don't know.
Late in my second year, and this is always going to be the baseline, late in my second year, of the 3 years I was on the road, the Canucks went to Arizona and then the two Southern California teams. So same sort of road trip here. Arizona obviously is Utah now. And got shut out in 3 straight games. I traveled. I actually got on flights to go see the Canucks get shut out in 3 consecutive road games. So this is bad, but
duly noted.
That was
duly noted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we used to always say that about the Caps. Like you flew to Orlando to see no goals. Like it's madness. All right, Jeff. Let's start with what was some pretty harsh criticism from Rick Tocchet in the post game. Do you differentiate what he said yesterday from what he has said after previous losses this season?
Not really. I mean, it took me right back to the Boston game in mid-December where he started to talk about guys going rogue and getting away from the game plan. And it's been a couple of months, but he went back to that page of his playbook, and he's not wrong. I mean, the defending on all of those rush chances was abysmal. And look, I know you talked about it one of the shows this week where everything Rick Tocchet touched last year, Midas touch, coach of the year, right? Well, when you go 11-7, just by the nature of having 7 defensemen, you're going to get some weird combos and guys that don't play together. Like on the Cutter Gauthier goal, it's JPat, who's the least of this team's concerns, but he's on the right side playing with Quinn Hughes. Well, he's barely been in uniform with Quinn Hughes and hasn't shared the ice with the captain very much. And all of a sudden, you're asking him now to make reads on the right side as opposed to his natural left side. The Strome goal was Forbort and Myers. They haven't played much together this season. And so this is what happens when you go 11-7. You get some odd and I'm not saying that's the reason, but I'm just saying we can pin it on the players, but there's enough to go around here right now. And it's just another example, I think, of the coach sort of trying strategies that are backfiring and blowing up in his face right now.
There was fair enough, because if Junior and Quinn are going to be out there, play Quinn on the right side, for God's sakes. Leave the youngster alone on his comfortable side.
There was a 2-on-2 where it didn't result in a goal, but both defensemen went to the same forward, and then they both realized, we're both here. Then they both left and went to the other. There were,
cue the yakety sacks.
Last night, it was a game that it should have been at least a 2-2 game. Between the goaltending, which could have been way better, and the defensive coverage, which generally has been way better, that's the Anaheim Ducks. That should have been, at worst, a 2-2 game going into overtime, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Ducks went into the night the lowest scoring team in the National Hockey League. Now, they've been better. In fact, they've been better than the Canucks since mid-December. And over the last 10 games, they've been racking up wins. But most of it's been on the back of their goaltending. Lucas Dostal has been terrific for them. And when John Gibson's been healthy, he's been good as well. So for them, it's really been about goaltending. And they haven't scored a bunch of goals, but they found an opponent last night that was willing to give them the neutral zone. They've got young talent. They've got guys that have some speed and skill, and it was on display there last night. And then the other part is that, look who scored the goals, right? They don't have a ton of top-end talent, but Vetrano's their leading goal scorer. Strome and Terry are their top players. Those guys are all over the score sheet. I look at the Canucks side of things. All the goals came in the first period. No Quinn Hughes, no Elias Pettersson. Besser gets a second assist there, but DeBrusk, I thought, was as quiet as he's been maybe all season long. So lots of ways to look at it. But top end of the Ducks beat top end of the Canucks without a doubt. And even though Quinn, I thought, tried second game of back-to-backs and generates 11 shots on goal, he was on the ice for 4 of the 5 Ducks goals, and that stands out just because we don't see that from Quinn Hughes very often, that his best defense is playing offense and spending a time up ice. And so for him, Strome gets to the puck before he does to set up Vetrano, and Hronek doesn't close the gap there. It was a great shot by Vetrano, but you'd like some saves along the way. And certainly the Gauthier goal and the Strome goal as well. Wrist shots from distance that just handcuff Artur Silovs. And we're sort of back to where we've been all season long with Artur Silovs now, that there was promise coming out of the Utah game, but Kevin Lankinen can't play them all. We don't know about Thatcher Demko. And so what does this do in terms of trust of the coaching staff, where the Canucks now are in a point where every point matters, every win matters? I'm not sure that there's a ton of faith in Artur Silovs after a performance like that one last night.
I said I think they should have played, and this isn't 2020 hindsight. I was thinking yesterday they should be playing Lankinen again. As well as Silovs played on the weekend, not denying that at all. They needed to guarantee that they got the 2 points. And based on the fact that he's coming off of 3 straight days of rest, playing back-to-back to me wasn't crazy to ask Kevin Lankinen.
Yeah, I mean, we won't know now. I mean, the Seattle game would have been 3-4 with some travel there.
Yep.
And we've seen earlier in the season that they have overplayed him. And I think they wanted to believe that Silovs had been playing well in Abbotsford, brought it to the NHL, looked good against Utah. We said the other night, hey, there are better teams out there than Utah, but on Sunday, that's who he faced, did the job, didn't get the victory, and now it's 1 win in 8 starts for Artur Silovs at the National Hockey League level this year. The goaltending is going to be fascinating. Now, I think they're in a point here now, Seattle, and then a couple of days off, and then days between games. I think Kevin Lankinen can probably run the next 4. Then they run into another back-to-back. Is Thatcher Demko going to be available by then? We'll find out when they get off the road trip, but they are going to have a difficult decision because the next set of back-to-backs at home to Montreal and in Calgary, if it is still about making the playoffs through all the faults and foibles of this hockey club, that game in Calgary might very well be the most important game they've got left on their schedule, and they will have a goaltending decision to make there.
Back to coaching and deployment, natural stat trick that Elias did not have, that line did not have an offensive zone start. Jeff, what do you make of that?
The coach has kind of thrown his hands in the air like a lot of the fan base has now. And so this is not to absolve Rick Tocchet, because the Canucks are the lowest scoring team in the NHL since Christmas, lowest shot totals. It feels like just about any coach could come behind the bench and take it to that level. So I think in the big picture, Rick Tocchet has to ask himself, and it's fair to ask, why is nothing changing? But part of the answer to that is because the $11.6 million guy is basically a non-entity. And last night, Arshdeep Bains and Nils Åman were as effective as Elias Pettersson, and those guys didn't play. And that's just the truth of the matter. And so I saw Farhan put out a poll question on his own personal Twitter about how many goals will Elias Pettersson score the remainder of the season. Guys, this started from a text exchange that Farhan and I had. There's 23 games to go. I have to believe in my heart of hearts that there is a goal left in Elias Pettersson at some point this season.
Mm-hmm.
But what is your number where this becomes a realistic question, where you could look yourself in the mirror and think, is he going to score again? Is it 15 games to go? Is it 10 games to go? Based on the evidence, the guy has 1 shot on a good night and no shots on a night like last night. He doesn't shoot the puck. Well, to put the puck in the net, you got to shoot it, essentially. There are 23 to go. Again, it's just, I can't get there. But the mere fact that I'm asking myself this now and asking you guys, it's just, it's wild. 1 goal in 19 games. Well, they got 23 to go. There's got to be another goal left there, doesn't there?
But it's 0-3. He's got it in brag. He's got it
0-3 is leading his poll with 50% of the vote.
I think that's the correct answer.
I'm voting 4. I think he gets to 15.
Dare to dream.
And it'll be in a full season. Predominantly full season. He'll miss a handful of games, but it'll be a full season. It'll be in the 70s in games played, guys.
Mm-hmm. And the other part, and sorry to bog you down with a bunch of numbers on a Friday, but you know me in hockey math, right? The math has become really clear, guys. They have 23 games to go. They have 65 points. 15-8 would get them to 95. This year, 95 gets them in. So if you believe the Canucks can go 15-8, then they're going to be a playoff team. If they go 14-9, That's 93 points. 13-10 is 91 points. And that is inviting trouble and company. Do they have 13 wins left in them based on
I think 91 points does get you in this year, by the way, but 13-10 is not easy. Like that's
a 6-game road
They
trip.
got a lot of home games left.
Which you'd like to think would mean something, but given the way they've played at home this year.
Yeah, but I think that may correct a little bit. Yeah, I mean, there's some sitters there, but there are also some pretty good teams coming through.
That middle week of March,
Eastern
they play.
road trip.
There are no sitters,
2
Matt.
weeks
Let's
of
be
March.
honest. Like Anaheim should have been a sitter. Seattle on Saturday should be a sitter, but given the state of this Vancouver Canucks team.
Yeah, but sure, Jeff, but they got Chicago and San Jose coming too, right? So,
But those middle 2 weeks of March, guys, they've got Utah, Calgary, and St. Louis. So by the end of spring break,
yep,
have a pretty good idea.
yep.
Essentially, just to drive home my point, I don't think they can afford more than 10 regulation losses. Whatever else happens in the other categories, if you want to look at it that way, if they flush 20 points, 10 regulation losses, now they're playing with fire. So just sort of try to frame it that way for the remaining 23 games.
For sure. Maybe even 9 regulation losses. But no, you're quite right, Jeff. Pius Suter, I thought he was pretty good last night, at least early and offensively. Look, you could say he boosted his trade value, but if you're moving him, you might as well run up the white flag, given where you are at center ice. Dollywall says they are talking, looking at like $3+ million to re-sign him. Where are you on bringing Suter back or using him as a trade piece at the deadline?
I think he's a pretty useful piece. He's not flashy, we know that, but he's versatile. And it's not just center ice, it's penalty kill. He's the first guy over the boards with Teddy Bluger, and penalty kill has been one area that the Canucks really have excelled over the last couple of months when so many other parts of their game have fallen away. The penalty kill has shot right up the middle here, and he's a huge part of that and just kind of quietly goes about his business. And again, I think it speaks to his hockey IQ, read and react. Not a flashy guy, but 15 goals, nothing to sneeze at. Certainly with the remainder of the schedule, you'd think that he could have a shot at 20. Went awfully quiet for a 6-week run, but that kind of happens with middle six forwards. And so you trade him away, you're chasing to find the next Pius Suter. And I guess that's kind of where I am with this, that is there a team out there that could use him for a playoff run for all the reasons that I just mentioned? Yeah, probably. I don't know what kind of return you'd get on the market, but ultimately you just find yourself back in the summer looking for another guy. I don't think Atu Ratu is ready to step in and deliver at the level that a Pius Suter does for the Vancouver Canucks. So he's just kind of quietly one of those low-maintenance guys, coach's dream, does what the coach asks wherever he puts him. And we saw in the last couple of years, again, is he a perfect player to slide into a top 6? No, but he has the defensive chops that made that JT Miller and Brock Besser combination effective and allowed, kind of covered up some of their mistakes. And so I guess I come back to this idea, do you win with Pius Suters? I'm not sure about that, but I just think if you trade him away, you're trying to replace him. And I don't think that they've got the options internally. And so are you basically spending the same sort of money on the devil you don't know in free agency as opposed to a guy that's here and settled and has been pretty good for you for the years that he's been a Canuck?
Are you any more clear on what big moves the Vancouver Canucks can even pull off at this point? Nibbling around the edges, going to get a winger from another team to try to have more offense down the stretch. It might be a good acquisition, but it's really not going to move the needle that much. Down the middle in particular, but in the forward set, they need big changes. I mean, do you have any sense that that's going to happen this year? Or is that a complete off-season to-do list thing?
Oh, I don't think anything's off the table with this group. I think it's becoming abundantly clear that it's not good enough. And even if it slides into the playoffs somehow and those other teams in the chase pack fall away, that you run into Vegas or Winnipeg in the first round. And I don't think that's going to be particularly pretty and will expose even more warts on the Vancouver Canucks. So I think in the short term and the long term, everything has to be at play here. And then the conversation comes back to doing everything you can to try to build around Quinn Hughes. But at some point, I and I'm certainly not there yet. But look, Jim Rutherford mentioned it first in the article to Gary Mason. They want to keep Quinn as a lifetime Canuck, but if they're going to rip it down, then they're going to have to consider that as well. I just wonder, is there enough time to build this back up to give Quinn this indication that, yeah, things are moving in the right direction and that you're going to be able to support him and put a contending roster together? Or in 2 years' time, does he just say, thanks, it was fun, and I'm out the door, and then what? So, it's multi-layered here. Obviously, it's really short term before the trade deadline. It's into the summer and around the draft, but then there are these massive big picture issues as well, and they all pertain to how do you get to championship contender status? And it just feels like last year, with every day that goes by, last year we just have to put in the outlier pile, right? Like, it was fun while we had it, but it's feeling now like if this thing slides away and yet another year without playoff hockey in the city of Vancouver, what are we doing here? And what is the direction of this operation and organization? Because I'm not seeing it, and I'm certainly not feeling it.
Feels like the bubble playoffs. Remember, there was the bubble playoffs were kind of fun, and then scuffle for a couple more years. Now that's last year as well. Just doesn't feel like it's going to be there, but we'll see.
Let me and look. Don't think it's going to happen because I don't think Francesco is wired this way. Plus, you're on a playoff spot. Rarely do we see teams on playoff spots, at least in this evolution of their team and with the mindset that this Canucks management and ownership group has shown. Rarely do they punt from here. But, Jeff, let me run it by. Spitball with me. Cam Robinson thinks Besser gets you a first-round pick and an A or B level prospect. Susie, Suter, maybe a couple of seconds, second and third, something like that. Forbert, maybe a fifth. You got 4 draft picks and a prospect and $13 million to redeploy for next year. Would you be inclined to sign up for something like that?
Yeah, I'll take the conversation a little bit sideways. I think I pick up the phone and I call Buffalo and say, hey, your season's going nowhere. Are you interested in Pettersson? Is this something that we can get our heads around again? If you could tell me that the Vancouver Canucks right now could land Dylan Cousins and Bowen Byram for Elias Pettersson, I think I'd sign up for it. Get up from under the contract. I would take Dylan Cousins and hope that there's a reclamation project there. You don't need Bowen Byram with Quinn Hughes and Marcus Pettersson, and we've seen the MO of this front office. Flip Bowen Byram and get another forward. And could you turn that into replacing Elias Pettersson with Dylan Cousins and player X that you would acquire in a second deal, moving Bowen Byram? And I think that's where this front office has done some of its best work, is not just focusing on the one trade, but what can the one trade lead to? But I'm kind of at that point now where my patience has kind of run out, and my hopes that Elias Pettersson can ever flip a switch and get back to being the superstar player. Every game that goes by, I just feel like that is getting tougher and tougher to reconcile. And so, yeah, I think that would be one of my moves right now with 7 days to go before the trade deadline. Call Buffalo and say, hey, you're going nowhere. It kind of feels like we're going nowhere. Maybe we swap each other's problems and see if we can't make it work that way.
Yeah, I said to Blake earlier in this week, Byram and Cousins is looking better and better with each passing day. And Blake and I have also had the conversation this week. I think it's going to be a desperate team that solves your Elias Pettersson problem, a team with problems of its own that you may have to take on. So that's quite sensible for me. The Cascadia Derby tomorrow, Jeff, from Climate Pledge in Seattle. You'll have RinkWide coverage post-game. We thank you for this, and we'll catch up next week.
Yeah, and do we think that this Seattle game will be as eventful as the one out of the Christmas break where the Canucks had the 4-1 lead with 5 minutes to go and flushed it, and then a week later in Seattle had a 3-1 lead in the third period, let it get away. Thatcher Demko left with back spasms, and they were able to salvage a shootout victory. But there's been a lot that's gone on in the 2 games so far between these teams. Kraken are 28th. Talk about teams that are going nowhere. 28th in the NHL standings, and again, you mentioned the word sitters. It feels like this is a very gettable game for the Vancouver Canucks, but at the end of a road trip, 5 and 8 nights for a team that's floundering offensively, all bets kind of feel like they're off right now.
I promise not to use sitters with you again, Jeff. I noticed how you clapped back at me there, but
Well, Blackhawks and San
I reserve
Jose.
the right for Chicago and
Blackhawks
San Jose.
I can get there.
All right. Thank you. We have agreement.